You remember that snowstorm, right? 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, the one right before the canceled Halloween in some of our towns. It was so odd because the trees were still covered with red and yellow and even green leaves. You remember when the storm came in? Like wide nets draped across the branches, all those leaves, they caught and they held that heavy, heavy, wet snow. So when the nor'easter's high winds barreled through, they tossed those weighted nets around in the sky, and with extra heft on them, many trees just snapped in half, were uprooted, or lost large and small limbs. Even some very large trees that didn't immediately fall later, a few days later. And for some of this storm was a traumatic experience, especially if our car or our home was damaged in the storm, or if we lost power for an extended period of time. For many of us, the extreme damage from the storm was also surprising. And for the trees, it was just too soon for all that snow. Sometimes life happens like that. It's too soon for the cold snap. The tomatoes aren't ripe yet. It's too soon for the baby. Her lungs aren't fully ready to breathe on their own. It's too soon for the diagnosis and the debilitation. The in-law apartment is only half finished. In Denise Levertov's poem, Beginners, she writes, "But we have only begun to know, to love the earth. We have only begun to imagine the fullness of life. How could we tire of hope? So much is in bud. How can desire fail? Surely our river cannot already be hastening into the sea. Surely it cannot drag in the silt all that is innocent. Not yet. Not yet. There is too much broken that must be mended, too much hurt we have done each other that cannot yet be forgiven. So much is unfolding that must complete its gesture. So much is in bud." When it's too soon, Levertov knows, we experience shock, we experience regret, we experience denial. We rebel against what is happening, crying out, "Not yet, not yet." How do we get through this time when our innermost being is calling out, "Not yet, not yet"? Our first reactions when we're shocked or surprised by something that comes too soon is pure fight, flight, or freeze, usually. Adrenaline-fueled survival reactions. But if we stay stuck in these reactions, we're going to snap like the trees or be uprooted. Eventually, usually, the primitive part of our brain that has been hogging all the blood and the oxygen starts to share it with the more advanced portions of our brain, and then we can start to reflect. We can incorporate new information. We can be curious. We can exercise our judgment. And finally, we can find a new normal, a renewed sense of joy or value in our lives. During these times of adjustment, something sustains our hope, our willingness to keep trying. Something gets us through. So I'm going to ask you now to think about, just a moment, think about an experience you had when something happened too soon. It could be you had to take over for your old boss when she was fired, before you even felt competent in your job. Maybe like me, you had figured out how to handle your preschoolers in the grocery store, finally, when suddenly they stopped running away down the aisles and started throwing tantrums instead, and I had to learn a whole bunch of new tricks to manage the grocery store with them. Or perhaps the progress of your father's Lou Gehrig's disease outpaced your attention and your efforts to build him an apartment attached to your house. Whatever it was that happened too soon, I want you to just spend a second and think about what got me through. Your answer might be a particular person, or your family, or a network of friends, or church. Maybe what got you through was your sense of being a part of a world where, as our first reading described it, we who will soon be gone see entities that continue to return, greener than ever. But whatever the specific words and ideas we use, beneath them lies a feeling, some degree of a feeling of trust, a feeling of faith in something that's bigger than ourselves. In some way, I see this search for greater feelings of trust to be even more than the search for better defined ideas of faith, to be the core of the spiritual journey. We search for what it is we really trust in life, and we seek to enrich it, to make it deeper, to make it broader. Theologically speaking, many of us in Unitarian Universalism are seeking a place that's grounded in yes, a place grounded in a sense of life as a gift, as original blessing. Think of our child dedications, the ones you've seen here on this chancel. They so clearly invoke original blessing and essential goodness of life, in contrast to the religious view that says original sin surrounds each new life. So we generally share the conviction, or at least the hope, that this life, this creation, are on balance good, even with the suffering and the evil they entail. This belief, or sometimes hope, of original blessing is part of the wonderful tradition that we're heirs to. There's a current, a stream in the Christian tradition that runs down through the centuries that carried the ancient Jewish idea that the universe and life were good, and we are the inheritors of that. Do you know that the first of the two creation stories in the book of Genesis, the first book of the Hebrew Bible, are you aware of those stories? There's the one in which God created the universe from chaos in 6 days and then rested on the seventh. And at the end of each day of work, the holy looked at what she'd done, and she saw that it was good. This was unusual among the religions of the time, to judge the world to be good. For many then contemporary religions, the world just was. It wasn't good, it wasn't bad. But we don't all come to this easily, this sense of life as original blessing. It's a faith. It's a confidence in things unseen. If we grew up in unsafe homes or unsafe neighborhoods or areas of the world, we need to learn to trust the gifts of life and the universe. And if we have some faith in original blessing, that faith is still vulnerable when something happens too soon, if we haven't nourished it by celebrating our lives and finding gratitude for what is in them. So maybe the challenge for us really is, how do we nourish the roots of whatever degree of faith we already have? The wider and deeper our roots, the healthier our core, the greater our ability to stay standing, even in nor'easters that come in the fall. We can even lose a big limb or two and survive, waiting for the sunlight and the eventual warmth of spring, knowing that this moment isn't the end of our story. I want to share a little of my own story here. My own roots started out very shallow. They grew slowly, for I came out of a birth family where a child's death, broken relationships, alcoholism, mental illness were all parts of the story. When I joined my first Unitarian Universalist church in Lexington many years ago, I was searching for what I could trust in the world, while at the same time I was trying very hard to protect what I valued. I valued my children, so I'd become active in the town and the public schools to help protect the kids of GLBT, gay and lesbian, bisexual, and transgender folk, kids like mine, from the hurtful, pervasive effects of hidden and not so hidden bias. I was also working to defend my own dignity as a person in this work. As I got deeper and deeper into it, the Lexington congregation, the minister, many individuals in that church supported and ministered to me in so many ways. They came to town-wide meetings to talk about controversies around the elementary school curriculum. They helped me plan events for the community. They showed up at important meetings. They celebrated our progress and affirmed the possibilities and the blessings of what we faced. They were kind and loving to my family, and they spoke caringly to me when they knew anti-gay folks were speaking pretty uncaringly. I learned that I could trust that church. Then I looked farther afield, and I learned I could trust this Unitarian Universalist movement. And gradually, I learned more and more to trust in my own capacity to live from a place of love rather than a place of fear. That was when I was ready to hear my call to ministry. I'm still learning what it means to live from a place of trust and love. Finding faith is the work of a lifetime for some of us. But I have seen how a faith community and movement can help people find faith in what is beyond themselves, what is within themselves, and help them broaden and deepen that faith. Each of our stories are different. The ways that we each deepen our own faith, nourish our own trust, define what we do believe in. All these will often be different. But the church community, caring for each other and the world beyond us, is so important in this process. Our shared celebration of life, of the little corners like this, pieces of heaven left lying around, picked up and saved, as William Stafford wrote in our first reading. Those are important too. So let's acknowledge that growing faith is a lifetime project. Let's be thankful that we have a church, a community of faith and accountability that can gift us with chances to learn about faith in many dimensions, so that when winter storms surprise us and our leaves are still green and the winds shake our snow-heavy branches, we won't snap so easily. We can even lose a big limb or two and survive, waiting for the sunlight and the eventual warmth of spring, knowing that this moment isn't the end of the story. Blessed be. Amen.